apart from having to be male, I think the essence of leadership for, I think, any situation is the emergence of a leader. And
Yeah.
the
How would you
idea,
define how would you define a leader? Because you don't want to
well,
use the
either the
definition.
leader asserts authority over the people around him, or he is chosen. And I suppose for people who are in need of a leader, they would think, well, um, he must be the person who knows the way, because in terms of leadership, it would be, you know, having a particular destination and knowledge the um, of the road, the path to the destination. So it could be a dog who knows the way, or a child. But you have to know the way, and then I guess if you want to be leader, you have to show that you know the way. So I guess the little dog would bark and draw his attention to itself, to the people, and then start running and hope that somebody will follow. Um, and for ordinary humans, you would have to say something like, "I know the way," and what happens
Right.
when
Well,
others
I
say,
mean,
"I know the way too." You're some insignificant so and so, and you're stupid. We have to anticipate the problems of, or you're just a child. How could you know the way? Or you're a
right.
woman. You couldn't possibly know the way, and
Well,
we disdain to follow you, even if you
right.
did know the way.
I mean, as always, I think that Islamic thought is a little overly simplistic in this area because, I mean, I separate authority and leadership, and just being somebody who knows the way isn't really the same as a leader. Authority is really the person who commands, and you have to obey out of obedience. But leader is more of the person that you voluntarily obey. And usually you see that reflected in governance because usually you'll have an authority figure that elects a leader. They're the ones who choose it in um, any natural example. For instance, you can see that in the Old Testament. One of the best examples is Pharaoh electing. There's a couple different kings like this throughout the Old Testament, like the Book of Esther,
Well,
and
he's already king, so I guess he
he's
has.
king, so he elects. Slow down. So he elects Joseph, the patriarch. Joseph, the patriarch, actually leads the country because he recognizes in Joseph wisdom, and then he elects him to lead the country, and then Joseph leads the country. So he said, "You're second to me in nothing but authority," but he's first in leadership, and that's the biggest thing. And it's also the biggest thing is like in the Western world, we have a problem where we don't really know what we're supposed to be doing, and we really don't know who we're supposed to be listening to. You know,
It's the
whenever
same,
they talk,
the wisest person, and nobody ever thinks to say, well, we would like a wise leader. How do we identify wisdom?
yeah, wisdom is ideal, but even wisdom is not necessarily what makes the best leader. I mean, you need certain traits, certain rare application virtues like courage and magnificence in a leader
Well,
that you
or
don't
just
necessarily get.
communication skills and a bit of, basic psychology to
No, I
to
mean,
know.
well, that's a great way to be manipulative. I think here's the thing. So me and you kind of got into an argument over monarchy because you think that monarchy is an anachronism, right?
Yes,
Yeah, see, I don't, because a monarchy is just means one person above. That's what it means. It means one
yeah,
person
it
in
could be
authority, one
president
person.
or monarch, couldn't it?
I think, well, the reason a president is not a monarch is because he's not above in the same way that a monarch is, because the monarch's functions in the United States, as one example, are split between the three branches. Because a monarch is the ultimate judge, he's the ultimate legislator, and he's the ultimate executive. But they split it out and complicate it
And call it
specifically so
separation
that,
of powers. But the
yeah, and the
point
reason,
is that the American president can be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, while there's no way of removing an absolute monarch other than through violence, as we know from the English Civil War, when Cromwell presumed to try King Charles I, and Charles first demanded, "By what right do you, Oliver Cromwell, have the right to try me?" And actually, Cromwell didn't have an answer, but he executed him anyway. But the point is that there was no, standard procedure to deal with kings you don't want, except to remove them by violence. And so, if it wasn't by a commoner, it would be by another rival royal
No, I
family.
mean the standard procedure for removing a king you don't want is patience, you know. Whereas because when you have something that is so ultimate, then it really does change from person to person. But like in the American system, the problem is the president doesn't dictate very many things. He doesn't have very much real authority or power. And so when he changes, it doesn't change much. It really doesn't. It's just it's almost an entertainment show, which
Well,
has kind of been.
it's the political parties that George Washington warned Americans against. I don't know if you read his farewell speech, Nathaniel, but he did say,
I've read it.
don't you have
I
great,
venture to
great.
say I've read a lot more about the founding fathers, American presidents, and American history than you have.
I'm prepared to concede that possibility, and so you will know that George Washington warned Americans against political parties, and
Yeah,
whatever
and many
Americans
things.
be doing, they would just
Well,
ignored him.
what he was talking about was not the modern political parties, as I pointed out to you before. I mean, just so you understand this, Carl, I wanted to be president at some point in my stupid life, and I read there was a lawyer in Washington State that kind of like took me under his wing a little bit, and he bought me a whole bunch of biographies, and I was already reading a whole bunch of biographies and books about American presidents, and so I learned a lot about American presidents. And when I moved to Tennessee, I took all those books into my front yard and I burnt them. That's kind of how I in my backyard, actually. It's kind of how I introduced myself to the neighborhood. It was all these books, from Last Lion about Churchill, all the way down to Truman, where I started, Lincoln, who's the worst president we've ever had, and just all of them: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, John Quincy Adams. I know a lot about them. And the thing is that the story doesn't end with George Washington. Also, the words George Washington is using is not the same thing. He talked about factions, which is different. What he was actually talking about, which is what I pointed out to you before, is he did not want the ruling class to be factionated. And he was totally happy with using violence to prevent that from happening, which is what John Adams kind of started doing with the Alien and Sedition Act. So it wasn't about political parties the way we have them now, where the whole country is divided into these camps that follow, a certain celebrity, where it's like, Washington, D.C. is Hollywood for ugly people. That's a completely different system than what George Washington was talking about. He was talking about factions. The reason he didn't want factions is because he knew that factions were the things that
It's
allowed
inevitable, though.
No, factions. Well, it might be inevitable. What he was talking about was he was saying that the oligarchy needs to be united in order to prevent the monarchy. That's what he was talking about, and in order to prevent the democracy as well.
In
He
order
wanted
to prevent the restoration of the monarchy, the institution of monarchy had to be abolished, and the church that supports monarchy, because in Europe, once upon a time, all kings were crowned by the Pope and had to
Yeah, but
derive
this is
their
what
moral authority from the Pope.
this is. Yeah, and that's the right way to do it. This is where I'm. This is what I was talking about when I say natural kingship. Is monarchy is as natural. It's as naturally occurring as oligarchy and democracy, and more so actually. oligarchy and democracy basically occur because of sin, but monarchy existed before sin because there was one man in the beginning. His name was Adam, and he was king over the world.
Well,
Um,
actually, according to the book of Samuel, I mean, Adam
according to
and
the
Eve
book of
had been
Samuel,
expelled from. Adam and Eve had already been expelled from Eden, so there was, at least the idea of original sin that um, so people already knew they were sinful and needed leaders and needed to be led out of Egypt to conquer Canaan, etc. So there were already ideas of leadership with Moses, whom the is the leader of Jews. So, but anyway, I mean, the idea was that Moses knew the way, right? He led the
yeah,
Jews out of
he was
Canaan and conquered it.
the last thing. See, this is where I heard the beginning, which was Samuel, and I heard the end of what you said, which was Moses. And I'd love to explain that because that's one of the most misinterpreted things in the whole Old Testament. One of the most retarded apologies for the American system I've ever heard. Because if you actually
Well, you
look
do
what's
have a
going
place
on,
called New Canaan in Connecticut.
oh
I don't
yeah,
know if you know this, but Ann Coulter grew up in New Canaan, Connecticut.
oh yeah, everywhere I go in America, there's Damascus, there's New Canaan, there's Bethlehem, there's all these. Yeah, that's what America named their towns after.
Well, yes,
It's
so
really nice.
Americans thought of themselves as kind of chosen in their own way.
Oh
And
yeah,
that,
yeah, that's what Manifest Destiny is all about. Yeah, they associated themselves with the Book of Judges, and that's why they violently, eliminated the savages, unlike the Spanish who converted them. So and intermarried with them, which is why there's a Mexican race, and why it's not quite white. You know what I mean? But okay, but let me explain this Book of Judges thing, Book of Samuel thing, because I'd love to explain that. People get
please
caught
do.
up on. What? What is it?
Please do, I said. I think we're kind of
Oh, okay.
talking over each other because there's some delay or something.
Yeah, this was one of the most important things to me when I was kind of like figuring this stuff out. Because I wasn't always a monarchist or a Catholic or a traditionalist or a feudalist or anything else. But people get so caught up with the words. It's kind of like Israel. They read Israel and they think it means what we mean when we say Israel today. They read Judges and they think it's the same thing as the Supreme Court of the United States. They read King and they think it's the same thing as the King of England. It's totally different. Samuel was a judge, and the thing that the people were upset about that caused them to go to Samuel and say, "We want a king," was not was not the institution of monarchy. They were upset about Samuel's sons because they looked at Samuel's sons and they said, these are the people who are going to lead us next. So, what do you call a man who's in charge of the whole country, who judges the whole country, and who passes that authority on to his sons when he dies? Well, we call that a king. So, Samuel was a king. But what he was talking about and what the people were talking about was a king in the way of the nations surrounding them, like the other nations. And what Samuel specifically talked about was taxes and a standing army, which is, by the way, the same thing you see in the United States with the institution of Constitution, which was a that was a coup d'état, essentially against the Articles of Confederation. But it was about taxation and a standing army. It was about taking a tithe from the people of their sons and their money. And and that's why also David is punished when people don't understand. There's an interesting thing about David towards the end of his life where God punishes him for taking a census of the people. So it has a lot to do with the operations of government, not there being one single leader, one single king. It actually has to do more with bureaucracy and the exploitation of the people under the way the pagans have their kings. That's what it's about. And the other thing I wanted to say about natural monarchy is you see kings cropping up everywhere if you understand them for what they are, which is a single leader that has ultimate authority and ultimate power within his jurisdiction and passes it on to his sons. And personally, in America, I believe through experience and through study that business and the private sector business is basically where you have monarchy. And it's also where you have true governance, because the political field in America at this point is just entertainment. They don't do that much. I mean, they cause trouble when they're ready to, but as far as people's day to day and what they actually do on a regular basis, they follow their employers.